My name is Sophia. At 27, my life had settled into a predictable rhythm with my boyfriend, Liam. We'd been together since college, a relationship built more on habit than passion. Our arguments had become routine too. Whether it was his refusal to plan for the future or the nights he spent glued to video games instead of being with me. More often than not, I lay awake in our shared bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was alone. We both knew we needed to have the talk, but avoidance was easier than confrontation. Care still lingered between us, but the spark that once fueled our connection had faded. My parents, in stark contrast, were everything I dreamed of having one day. Married for over 27 years, they were the embodiment of enduring love, playful, affectionate, and full of inside jokes that could make anyone smile. They were my anchor, my example of how love could last. With Liam, such a bond felt far away, like something glimpsed through frosted glass. The night of the accident started as an ordinary evening. Liam and I had argued over something as trivial as undone laundry, a chore he'd promised to handle but hadn't. "Is it so hard to do one thing you said you'd take care of?" I snapped, frustration bubbling over. "It's just laundry, Sophia. I'll get to it," he replied, not even glancing away from his computer screen. Like most of our fights, it ended without resolution, the deeper problems left untouched. Later that evening, I found comfort in my parents' presence as I sat in the backseat of their car. We were celebrating my mother's birthday, and their laughter filled the space, a welcome relief from the tension at home. They spoke in their usual light-hearted way, teasing and finishing each other's sentences. I remember thinking how rare that kind of connection was. Then came the blinding flash of headlights, the deafening crunch of metal, and then, nothing. When I woke up, the antiseptic smell of a hospital and the rhythmic beeping of machines greeted me. A heavy fog of dread settled over me as a nurse explained what had happened. My parents were gone, and my legs might never function again. Her words felt distant, like an echo in a vast, hollow space. The grief was suffocating, an unrelenting wave crashing over me. The life I had known, every comfort, every certainty, was gone. Liam was now my only tie to the world I'd left behind, a world where my biggest worry had been the laundry. But here I was, confined to a hospital bed, grappling with the unthinkable. Time lost all meaning as despair wrapped itself around me. One day, Liam appeared in the doorway, his parents Avery and Julian following close behind. Their faces carried a mixture of sympathy and unease, the weight of the moment pressing down on all of us. Liam hesitated before stepping to my side, pulling a chair closer and taking my hand. His touch was different now, uncertain, but full of purpose. "Hey, Sophia," he said softly, his voice lacking its usual bravado. My throat felt dry, but I managed to speak. "What about us?" I asked, my voice fragile, barely audible. He hesitated, his gaze meeting mine, a storm of emotion in his eyes. "Everything that's happened, it's made me realize how fragile life is," he said, his tone raw. "I've been waiting for the right moment to say this, but now I know there might never be a perfect time." I blinked, unsure of what he meant. He squeezed my hand, steadying himself. "Sophia, will you marry me?" he asked, his words a quiet tremor in the air. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Of all the things I had expected, an apology, a promise, even a breakup, this wasn't one of them. I searched his face, bracing for signs of impulsiveness, the Liam I knew who often acted on whims. Instead, I saw only sincerity. Avery stepped forward, her voice soft and maternal. "We want you to know you're not alone, Sophia," she said, her hands clasped together. "You're family to us, and we'll take care of you." Her words melted into the quiet room, heavy with unspoken emotions. I stared at Liam, unsure of how to respond. unsure if I could find a way forward, yet unable to ignore the earnestness in his voice. Julian spoke up quickly, his tone firm yet compassionate. And it's not out of pity. We love you, Sophia. Truly. We want to support you and Liam in this decision because we believe in both of you. His words hung in the air, an anchor in the sea of uncertainty. My thoughts whirled as I tried to process what was happening. Liam's proposal was unexpected, even rash, but it also felt like a lifeline in the darkest moment of my life. I looked at him, searching his face for answers, and for the first time, I saw beyond the sometimes immature boyfriend. Here was a man trying, in his own way, to stand by me during the most unpredictable chapter of my life. Liam, my voice faltered, thoughts scattering like dry leaves in the wind. He squeezed my hand gently. It's okay, Sophia. You don't have to decide right now, he said, his thumb tracing slow, calming circles on my skin. I thought of my parents, of the unwavering love they had always shown me. They would have wanted me to be cherished, to be surrounded by people who cared deeply for me, no matter what. With a shaky breath, I made my choice. Liam, I'm unsure about so many things, the future, us, but yes. The word surprised even me as it escaped my lips, steadier than I felt. Yes, I'll marry you. Relief and joy swept across Liam's face, his first genuine smile in days lighting up his features. Avery let out a soft sob, covering her mouth as tears welled in her eyes, and even Julian's normally stoic demeanor cracked as he blinked away the shimmer of emotion. Moving into my parents' house with Liam was meant to be the start of a new chapter, but the weight of their absence haunted every corner. The house was too large for one person, filled with memories that loomed like ghosts. I hoped Liam's presence would help fill the void, but instead, it only seemed to accentuate it. At first, he was attentive, always ensuring I had what I needed, staying close, offering support in ways that felt genuine. But as the weeks passed, his attention waned. His comforting presence was replaced by the familiar sight of him at his computer, headphones on, lost in a digital world that had no room for me. One evening, as I maneuvered my wheelchair into the kitchen, I found him once again immersed in his screen. I hesitated before speaking, trying to keep my tone light. Liam, have you thought about looking for a job? The bills are starting to pile up, and the insurance isn't covering everything. He didn't even glance up. I told you, Sophia, taking care of you is my job now. Frustration crept into my voice despite my best efforts to suppress it. But I can manage during the day. You don't have to be here all the time. This time, he turned to face me, his expression unreadable. There was something sharp in his gaze, an edge I hadn't seen before. What do you want from me, Sophia? I'm here, aren't I? His tone was clipped, defensive. Simply being here isn't the same as being present. Liam, I said carefully, my voice trembling despite my resolve. I need more than a roommate, I need a partner. He stood abruptly, the sound of the chair scraping against the tile floor like a final punctuation mark. You know what, Sophia? Maybe I need more than this too. Maybe I'm not meant to be just a nurse, he said, his words cutting deep. I sat frozen as he stormed out, the sound of the door slamming echoing through the empty house. Alone in the quiet kitchen, I felt his words settle over me, heavy and suffocating. I wasn't just alone, I was profoundly lonely. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as memories of our brief honeymoon phase played like an old film reel in my mind. The promises we'd made, the vows we'd exchanged, they all felt like relics of another life. The Liam who had once stood by me with unwavering support now felt like a distant stranger. As the weeks passed, his absences grew more frequent, his excuses thinner. He was either out with friends or locked in a digital realm where I didn't exist. The distance between us widened, And with each passing day, I felt more like a burden he hadn't anticipated carrying. On a particularly difficult day, as I battled a flare of pain and the oppressive silence of the house, I realized something chilling. The life we were trying to build together might already be crumbling beneath the weight of what we'd lost. I heard the front door creak open, and my heart lifted. Hoping it was Liam, I called out his name, but his distant voice, muffled by the walls, confirmed my fear. He was just stopping by to grab a few things. Going out with friends? I asked, trying to mask the disappointment in my voice. There was a brief pause, followed by the sound of keys jangling. Sophia, I need some space. This isn't easy for me either. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, willing the tears not to spill. I understand. I just thought maybe we could spend some time together, like we used to. He didn't meet my eyes. Maybe when things settle down. I've got to go. And just like that, the space between us grew wider, colder. The house, once full of laughter and love, now felt more like a hollow shell. Every day, it seemed to echo with the absence of not only Liam, but also the laughter of my parents, whose voices I could no longer hear. But it wasn't just the emptiness that unsettled me, it was the slow erasure of everything I held dear. My mother's favorite vase, a photo frame of us all at the beach, the painting she placed so carefully in the hallway. All these small, meaningful objects began to vanish. It was as though the home was being slowly dismantled piece by piece, leaving behind nothing but memories. One afternoon, as I tried to distract myself by sifting through old photos, I noticed a bare patch on the wall. The painting that had once hung there, a landscape my mother had loved, was gone. Confused, I called out to Liam, but there was no answer. Later, when he returned, I asked him about the missing painting. He barely looked up from his phone. Oh, that old thing? It was just collecting dust. I thought we could use the space for something else. His flippant response caught me off guard, but it was my mom's favorite, I said, my voice quiet, almost pleading. He didn't even glance at me, still lost in his phone. We can always get another one, he muttered dismissively. His indifference stung, and for the first time, it hit me. This wasn't just about a painting. The growing chasm between us was mirrored in the disappearing relics of my past. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing, a trivial matter, maybe even a misunderstanding. But the more things disappeared, the more the weight of it sank in. These weren't just any items. They were cherished pieces of my family's history, things that had been passed down through generations. Then, one day, I caught Avery, Liam's mother, mid-theft. She was hurriedly stuffing a family heirloom into a large black garbage bag, her eyes darting around the room as though she could somehow erase the evidence. "What are you doing, Avery?" I demanded, my voice trembling with panic. She jumped, startled, cheeks flushed with guilt. "Oh, just a little spring cleaning, sweetheart. There's so much clutter around here," she said, her tone trying to sound casual, like she wasn't up to something sinister. "But those are my things," I objected, my pulse quickening as the panic set in. Avery smiled sweetly, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. "It's all for the best, dear. We're just trying to make things nicer for you. You'll be grateful for it later." From then on, I kept a watchful eye on her whenever she visited. The thefts became more subtle, strategic. Little by little, pieces of my past were disappearing, replaced with empty promises. Whenever I confronted Liam about it, he'd reassure me with vague assurances that it was all for my best interest. One evening, as I lay in bed, the silence between us stretched long. I turned toward Liam, who was absorbed in his phone, barely acknowledging my presence. "Liam, your parents have been taking things." "My things," I said quietly, my heart pounding. He didn't even look up from his screen. Mom's just trying to help. You know she's good at this kind of stuff, he muttered, his voice flat. Help? I echoed, incredulous. By taking my family's possessions? He sighed, setting his phone down with an air of resignation. When he finally met my eyes, I saw the exhaustion in his own. Look, they think we should focus on the future, not the past. They're just trying to ease your burden. The frustration inside me boiled over, but the weight of my fatigue crushed my words. This isn't what I want, I whispered, my voice small, defeated. Liam reached out, patting my hand absent-mindedly. The gesture felt more like a dismissal than a comfort. Try to get some sleep, Sophia, he said, his voice distant. Things will look better in the morning. But they wouldn't. They never did. Unable to carry the burden any longer, I reached out to Riley, my closest friend and lead therapist. She had been a constant source of support throughout my recovery, and her visits were one of the few things that offered me comfort in the wake of everything that had changed. Riley, something's happening in the house, I confided during one of our sessions. Things are disappearing, and I think Liam and his parents are behind it. Riley paused, her hands resting gently on my shoulders, offering me the quiet strength I so desperately needed. Have you talked to Liam about it? I have, I said, my voice bitter, but he brushes it off, claiming his parents are just helping by clearing out some clutter. But it's only my family's things that are disappearing. Her brow furrowed with concern. That doesn't sound right, Sophia. Do you want me to do something? Maybe I could come by more often, keep an eye on things? A flicker of resolve sparked within me. Could you help me set up a camera, just to see what's happening when I'm not around? Riley nodded firmly, her face set with determination. I'll bring something tomorrow. We'll get to the bottom of this. The next day, true to her word, Riley arrived with discreet recording devices, small enough to blend into the background of our home. We placed them carefully around the house, almost like setting a trap. Though it felt surreal, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something sinister was happening. I needed the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. A few days later, Riley returned, her expression grim. She had the recordings. We sat down together, and the cold, mechanical sounds of the playback filled the room. The voices of Liam and his parents cut through the silence, each word landing like a blow. As I listened, I felt the room close in around me. Their casual, calculating conversation revealed a disturbing plan, one that had been unfolding right under my nose. Liam's voice was clear and devoid of any warmth. Once she's fully committed, the house and everything in it will be ours. The words sent a chill down my spine, like ice sliding through my veins. It was all about the house, the things my parents had worked so hard to build, and they were taking it all. Avery's voice came next, eager and calculating. The property alone could fetch a small fortune, not to mention the antiques. We're looking at a serious profit. Her greed was palpable, and I felt nauseous hearing her scheme so openly, as though she had every right to the life my parents had created. Julian's voice followed, conspiratorial and cold. We just need to keep Sophia in the dark until we're ready. Once she's no longer an obstacle, everything will be ours. The words blurred together, but their meaning was clear. They were taking everything from me, the home, the memories, the life I had known, the people I had trusted, the ones I thought cared for me, were plotting to strip it all away. Tears stung my eyes as I sat there, overwhelmed by the sheer betrayal. How had I been so blind? Liam, the man I had once loved, the man I had believed would stand by me, was part of this. Beside me, Riley's grip on my hand tightened, her own anger barely contained. We can't let them get away with this, she said, her voice steady and fierce. We need to stop them before it's too late. I nodded, though my chest felt hollow. The weight of their betrayal settled over me like a dark cloud. And the next day, every word, every glance from them felt like a cruel lie. The following morning, I woke to an unsettling silence. The usual sounds of the city, cars, birds, distant chatter, were eerily absent. I looked out the window, and my stomach sank. The ramps, those simple, essential pieces of the house that connected me to the outside world, were gone. Panic gripped me. "Liam!" I called out, my voice rising with desperation. "Where are the ramps?" Liam appeared in the doorway, keys in hand. He looked at me, his eyes darting away, avoiding my gaze. "Oh, those old things? They're being repaired," he said, his voice flat. "I thought it'd be safer if you stayed inside for a while." His words rang hollow, his excuses thin and unconvincing. I stared at him, the full weight of his deception crashing down on me. The ramps weren't being repaired, they were gone, and with them, my last illusion of safety. The truth was finally undeniable: the people I loved were betraying me, and there was no turning back. It wasn't safety, it was entrapment. The word safer burned through me, and before I could stop myself, I blurted out, "Or trapped." Liam didn't respond. He simply turned away, his silence more damning than any words could be. My chest burned with a mix of rage and helplessness. I had trusted him, and now it felt like a lie was being woven around me. Later, I confronted Avery about the missing ramps. Her tone was dripping with false sweetness. "We're just looking out for you, dear," she said, resting her hand on my shoulder with exaggerated tenderness. "We wouldn't want you to have any accidents, right?" I recoiled from her touch, disgust flooding my veins. I didn't realize needing ramps was considered a hazard. I shot back, my voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside me. For a split second, I saw a flicker of something darker in Avery's eyes, something closer to her true intent. But just as quickly, she masked it, her practiced smile sliding back into place. "We're just trying to help, Sophia. It's for the best." The words hit like ice, but it was the truth that stung the most. I wasn't a person to them. I was an obstacle, a means to an end. That night, as the darkness closed in, the weight of their betrayal was suffocating. I could feel Liam out there somewhere, likely avoiding the guilt he was too weak to face. Desperation surged through me. I reached for my phone, my lifeline. Riley's number was the only one I trusted now. My hand shook as I dialed, the urgency in my voice sharp as I whispered, "Riley, they've taken the ramps. I'm trapped in my own house." Her response was immediate, a beacon in the storm. "Hang tight, Sophia. I'm on it. We'll fix this." I clung to her words, grateful for the small comfort they offered, as the silence of the house pressed down harder. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension, and my pulse quickened. As I made my way to the door, I saw Riley standing there, flanked by two sharply dressed individuals, an older man and a woman, both exuding authority. Behind them, my attorney, Mr. Dillon, stood holding a leather briefcase, his expression one of determined professionalism. "Sophia," Riley said, her voice strong and resolute, "we're here to set things right." Mr. Dillon stepped forward, his tone brisk. "First, I need to tour your home and cross-check it with the inventory list of your parents' estate." As we moved through the house, the two advocates scribbled notes, their disapproval of the missing ramps and the clear neglect of my needs evident in every glance they exchanged. I could almost feel the walls of the house pressing in on me, no longer a sanctuary, but a battleground. That's when Liam walked in, his face full of confusion. "Sophia, what's going on? Who are these people?" I met his gaze, my own eyes hard with determination. "I'm reclaiming control. Liam, this is my lawyer, and these are advocates for my rights. They're here to ensure my living conditions are safe and that my property is respected. The moment Avery and Julian entered, their expressions shifted from confusion to alarm. Their carefully crafted facades were beginning to crack. "Avery, what is this about?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and disbelief. I took a steady breath. "This is about my rights, my home, and the truth." Mr. Dillon opened his briefcase, revealing a pile of documents and photographs. "We have detailed records of all the items left to Mrs. Harper," he said, his voice unwavering. "It seems several valuable items are missing." Julian's face turned pale. He stumbled over his words, his voice rising in panic. "No, no, there must be some mistake." "There's no mistake," I interrupted, my confidence bolstered by the hard evidence. Riley's recordings echoed in my mind, sharp and unforgiving. One of the advocates spoke up, her tone firm and unyielding. "Removing necessary ramps directly violates Mrs. Harper's rights. We will be taking action." As Mr. Dillon laid out the overwhelming evidence, proof of their theft and their calculated plans for my future, the reality of my entrapment became all too clear. But this time, the tables were turned. I wasn't the one in the cage. They were, and I had the key. Liam finally spoke, his voice weak and pleading. "Sophia, I can explain." I cut him off, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Save it, Liam. I've heard enough." Avery's face crumpled, her tears flowing freely now. Julian tried to console her, but there was no room for sympathy anymore. Their betrayal had stripped away everything. The trial that followed was the culmination of everything I had endured, a confrontation in the stark, sterile courtroom that felt more like a battlefield than a place of justice. Liam and his parents, once the pillars of my world, now sat across from me, no longer the family I had believed in, but the adversaries they had always been. With Riley by my side and Mr. Dillon at the helm, I felt a newfound strength. The briefcase Mr. Dillon carried was filled with the weight of truth, evidence that would strip away their lies. The room fell into a heavy silence as the judge leaned forward, his gaze briefly meeting mine before he spoke. "Today, we are here to examine the evidence in relation to the allegations of theft and intentional exploitation of Sophia Harper," he declared, his voice firm and deliberate. Mr. Dillon began his presentation, unfolding the case piece by piece, recordings of incriminating conversations, discrepancies in the inventory list, and powerful statements from disability advocates who had witnessed the neglect and mistreatment I had suffered. The evidence grew, undeniable and irrefutable, and I could see Liam's family squirming, their carefully crafted masks slipping as the walls of their deception closed in on them. In the background, Avery's soft sobs rose like a mournful song, her tears barely masking the unraveling of their entire facade. "We never meant for it to go this far," she whispered through her tears during her statement, her voice trembling with a mixture of guilt and fear. The judge turned toward her, his voice unwavering. "You took advantage of a vulnerable individual, and there is no excuse for what you've done." Liam rose, his face pale, his voice shaking. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I never wanted to hurt you." His apology hung in the air, but it was empty, too little, too late. The memories of the life we had once shared flashed before me, each moment now a bitter reminder of his betrayal. "Sorry isn't enough, Liam," I replied, my voice steady despite the rush of emotion inside me. "You made your choice." The judge's gavel came down with a firm, final sound, sealing their fate and closing the chapter on the life I had once known. Liam and his parents were convicted of their crimes. They were ordered to make restitution and, more importantly, barred from any further contact with me. It was a legal victory, but it didn't erase the scars they had left behind. With Riley and a dedicated team of professionals, I began the long, difficult journey of healing. Physical therapy became my new battleground, where every small motion, every slight improvement, felt like a victory. My legs, once immobile, began to throb with a life I hadn't believed would return. One afternoon, as I stood using the parallel bars, Riley's voice rang out, full of pride and encouragement. "Look at you, Sophia. You're doing it." Her smile mirrored mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, a rush of joy filled me, an emotion so deep and pure, it felt like a rediscovery of something I thought I had lost forever. Step by step, I pushed forward. My home, once a cold reminder of betrayal, slowly transformed into a place of healing and strength. It became a sanctuary again, not because of what it had been, but because of what I was becoming, someone who could rise again, no matter how deep the wound.